right. So good morning, good evening, everyone. I'm really honored to be sharing my experience with all of you today. It was a very overwhelming response in terms of people who have registered. So we'll give it another 2 to 3 minutes before we officially get started. But I'm super excited to be doing this. And if any one of you wants to join me on video, ask me questions live, please let me know. I will get you promoted. If you want to ask over audio, that's fine as well. We want to keep this interactive. So just feel free to shoot me a message or raise your hand and we'll get you on. With me, I've promoted Amit, Keval, Abhinav as well to be co-presenters. So if you guys have any questions as we're going through, feel free to ask me. We will have dedicated time towards the end for Q&A. So as people are posting questions in the Q&A section, I will be responding to them live. Please try to get to as many as I can. All right, so we have people trickling in more and more. This has been amazing. I had a Zoom meeting schedule and I actually had to go in the back end and change it to a webinar. So it's really an amazing experience. You can ask questions anonymously as well, so that's not a problem. We will make the recording accessible as well to everyone who has registered. Okay, so we'll give it another 2 to 3 minutes. Just a reminder, everyone, if anyone wants to ask me a question live, wants to hop on over either video or audio, feel free to send me a note or raise your hand. I will get you promoted to be a panelist. This is exciting. The group is exciting. There's so much of things that we can learn from the Facebook group. So it's just been amazing. I just started following it a few months ago and was really impressed with the type of conversations that we're having in the group. So definitely exciting. Okay, so I think in the interest of time, we're 3 minutes into this. We'll get started. Again, good morning and good evening, everyone. Really appreciate that you all took time off your schedule and joined me this morning or this evening. It's been an honor for me to be doing this. As we can all imagine, we're in really troubled times, and anything that I can do to help the community, I will be honored to. And that's the reason why I felt that I should share this experience with the broader audience, because Not only will this be helpful if you're interviewing for Amazon specifically, or if you want to, it will also be helpful if you're interviewing for other companies. I think some of the methodology and the preparation that I will be sharing is applicable across companies, across types of positions, etc. So I would love for, as we're walking through this, I'll keep that in mind, that, I'll hint towards highlighting how this can be useful for other organizations. Okay. Awesome. So with that said, I kind of created this PowerPoint to give it a structure. We're gonna start with talking about how I got sourced, what are recruiters looking for in candidates when they are hunting people down. I will talk about the interviewing format in general. I will highlight the preparation that went into this interview, my first phone screen, what that experience was, the experience for the on-site, which is now all virtual, the written assignment that Amazon mandates every candidate to go through, and then we'll have some dedicated time for Q&A. So that's really the way I was gonna structure this conversation. So first and foremost, in terms of getting sourced, right? Resumes and your LinkedIn profiles, right? These are the two main assets that you have in order to showcase your brand, right? I truly believe that every one of us here represents something, right? We represent some values, we represent some great experience that we've all had. We represent an amazing journey, right? There is no right or wrong here. But what we need to do is realize that when recruiters are looking for candidates, they're looking for someone who can demonstrate strong leadership skills, who can demonstrate business acumen, who can demonstrate experience that resonates really well with the role that they're looking for. So as you're building your resume and your LinkedIn profile, keep that in mind. Talk about your experience, not in terms of tasks and deliverables. Talk about your experience in terms of results. This is something that we often forget, or probably is the most difficult thing to do, right? Everything that you do has some result, right? It either helps move the needle for the organization in terms of revenue, in terms of code quality, if you come from an engineering background, in terms of customer complaints that can be resolved, so on and so forth, right? So there's always some impact that your current experience is having in the organization that you're working for. So you need to really look into what that impact is and how you can quantify that. It is really hard to do that, but it's so critical when recruiters are looking for candidates, because that's what really makes you stand out. So when I created my LinkedIn, I started looking, venturing out about 3 months ago, 3 to 4 months, like probably around March, April, just when we got hit with this pandemic. I felt, I have some time at hand. Let me, just look around and see how, what things are. So I was very casual, but I said, okay, let me just go ahead and update my LinkedIn profile and my resume. And as I was writing it down, I realized that, so what? So what if I've driven the product vision and the roadmap and worked with engineering and worked with marketing, right, to get my product out and successful? Let me highlight some numbers. And that's where I said, okay, we got 8,000 customers from a few hundred. We're the fastest growing SaaS service because we got to 8,000, right? So everything is quantifiable. And what was the result of some of the work that I've done? So that's something that's super, super important. Make sure that you can back up everything that you have on your resume. That's going to be extremely critical as well, because when recruiters and hiring managers are going to go through your resume, they are going to nitpick everything that you've stated and highlighted. And there should be a story that you should very confidently be able to articulate. So that's something that I always tell my students, my mentors, mentees, that they need to make sure that everything that's on the resume has a very strong story that they can articulate. Make sure it looks modern. We, all realize this is 2020. So try to make it look professional, make it look modern, so that it stands out. And then also avoid weasel words. And we'll talk more about this. So let's hold that thought for a little later. And then before we go to the next slide here, I just wanted to highlight my background, right? So I realized I didn't start by highlighting that. So I have been in the product management industry for about 10 years, a little over 10 years. I started my career with Cisco, where I actually was a customer support engineer. I was working in their technical assistance center in US, and was working with customers to help resolve their networking issues, right, with using Cisco products. So I was very technical. I went through all the Cisco certifications at the time. And then I had the opportunity to pivot into a technical marketing engineer role within Cisco itself. And from there, it was very easy for me to transition into product management, because technical marketing is the liaison between customers and product management, especially for large organizations. So the key thing that I want you all to take away from this is, in order for you to transition into product management, because I know that there are a lot of people who wants to do that, one of the things is customer exposure, right? So if and how you demonstrate that will make it really easy for you to get in as a product manager. And I can say that very confidently because I recently helped my wife transition from being a QA engineer to a product manager, right? So the key is that customer exposure is extremely important. And if you can somehow demonstrate that as part of your resume, as part of your story and journey, it will be a lot easier for you to transition into product management. So that was my Cisco days. And then after Cisco, I joined a startup back then called Blue Jeans Network, which is a competitor to Zoom, the product that we're on. It's a video conferencing SaaS application. I joined as their second product manager to help grow and scale the product and platform. I spent 5 years there, believe it or not. It was, when I joined it, we were about 40 employees. And when I left, there were about 400. So the company did really well. It recently got acquired by Verizon. So that was gratifying. But I think most importantly, the things that I learned while I was at Blue Jeans was just amazing. Like the experience was so gratifying because I had the opportunity to get my hands dirty across so many functions. And that is absolutely critical, especially when you're in the growth phase of your career, is to try to get into a role where the responsibilities that you have spans across functions, because that's when you get the most exposure. And when you get the most exposure, you learn a lot. So I would say that was my Blue Jeans experience, 5 years there. From there, I wanted to get back into the IT space and the more challenging infrastructure in a space. And so I joined VMware. And what was interesting about VMware was it was a product that was very new at the time. It had established product market fit by the founding team, who were a bunch of engineers. And they wanted to hire a product manager to take it to market and formulate a go-to-market strategy and to scale that product. So we had about 200 customers when I started, and we're now at over 10,000. So this LinkedIn profile is just a couple of months back, and at that time we were at 8,000. So we're just seeing phenomenal growth in this product that I'm managing. And then 2 years, and now I have interviewed with Amazon. I got through. I am in round 2 with Facebook. So it's been just fun. So that's about me. Outside of work, I have done a lot of cool things. I have biked from San Francisco to Los Angeles, 545 miles over a 7-day period for a charity. So I really enjoy biking. And I really enjoy teaching and mentoring as well. I used to be an instructor at the product school, where I spent 2 years doing it part-time 2 years ago, back when I was at Blue Jeans. And then I've also attended a lot of certifications from Pragmatic Institute, from Stanford, their entrepreneurship course, data science course, marketing course, and also some courses from Amsterdam on growth hacking. So I'm always demonstrating my curiosity to learn and to grow my career and myself. And now more recently, as you probably have seen in my posts, I have started my own training academy, my own product management masterclass. So I'm super excited about that as well. So let's get into the Amazon experience, right? So first and foremost, just ground these 4 letters in your brains as you're approaching interviews. And I believe this is applicable across any interview that you go for, right? Whether it's for product management role or for a technical program management role or for a product analyst role, so on and so forth, right? It does not matter. I think responding in this format is going to really help you nail any interview that you sit for, right? So it's called the STAR format, where you describe the situation, and this is to respond to questions like, tell me about a time when you had a difficult customer to deal with, or tell me about a time when you had a very challenging task given to you by your manager, right? So these are all the behavioral type questions that you will be asked at Amazon, and your responses should be in this format. So you describe the situation that you were in, be very specific and give enough details, but don't spend 10 minutes on describing the situation. So you have to be to the point. I would say no more than 3 sentences to describe the situation, right? Then you describe all the different tasks that needed to be done, what goal you had in mind that you were trying to accomplish, what actions you actually took, and then of course the result, right? What results you saw after you performed those actions. Now, for actions, one of the most important thing for you to note, and this might be very specific to Amazon, is they are looking for you to use the word I. And if you don't use it, they will actually ask you and call you out for it. And it happened with me. So in some of my responses, I kept, human nature, right? We try to be humble, most of us at least. So I, responded by saying, yeah, we worked together on the go-to-market strategy to get to 300 to 8,000 customers. So the interviewer called me out on that and asked me, can you tell me what actions you specifically took in order to get from 300 to 8,000, right? So that's the key thing to remember is you will be called out. But if you can preemptively use the word I and not we, it'll be very helpful and will increase your chances of success. It's hard, but I really, really kept that in mind as I was giving responses to all the questions. And then, of course, the result, right? So what the actions that you took, the tasks that you were asked to deliver on, the situation that you were in, what were the results? And as I said, don't be shy to take credit for your actions, for the work that you've done. Um, Highlight things that can be quantifiable, and that will take us to the next slide here. But being able to associate metrics and data is extremely critical these days, right? So that's something that you should definitely keep in mind, is as you're highlighting your results, use data as much as possible to quantify your achievements and accomplishments. Okay, so let's talk about what are some of the things that you will be evaluated against, right? So this is extremely important to know going into the interview, because as you're giving your responses and as you're formulating your thoughts, keep these things in mind, right? So first and most importantly, your stories. Now, Amazon is all about behavioral questions. They do not ask questions like how Facebook or Google does around designing products and designing solutions to problems. They will be exclusively focused on behavioral questions, right? So in order to respond to these behavioral questions, we'll talk more about that in a few minutes here, you need to come up with stories, right? Stories that describe your journey, stories that describe the work that you've been doing, whether it's in your most recent company or a company before that, stories that really demonstrate the 14 leadership principles that we will talk about, okay? Amazon values these principles like no other company that I've seen. Every interviewer is actually assigned 2 or more leadership principles that they will evaluate you against. So they will ask you all questions that revolve around that leadership principle. And so it's very important to know them. It's not important to memorize them. They're not going to actually ask you to tell, give and let them know what those 14 leadership principles are. But it's important to know what type they are and, what they're looking for in those. So we'll go through that in a minute here. Domain knowledge is also important, though they don't put a whole lot of emphasis, but for certain roles, it will be important for you to be in that space. For AWS, they were looking for someone with, the background around infrastructure, either networking, either from any storage company or from a compute company. Being from VMware, it was a real easy fit. But at least knowing about AWS, knowing about cloud computing, knowing about public clouds, hybrid clouds, private clouds, how data center operates and functions, that information definitely helps, right? Writing skills are going to be extremely important as well. You will be evaluated against your written assignment. In fact, one of the interviewers picked up my assignment and asked all the questions related to that assignment that I had written down. So it's extremely important to have a good written assignment. There are 2 types of questions they ask in that. One is about an innovative project or product that you have led and why you believe it was innovative and what actions you took to lead that innovation. And then the second one was around, tell me about a time when you had to pivot from your original idea and what trade-offs you had to make. 14 leadership principles we talked about, and then being data driven is extremely important as well. So quantify as much as possible in your responses. I've launched a product that my customers really appreciated is very vague, right? What does very much mean? So you're better off saying that I launched a product that had a net promoter score of plus 60 or plus 50, right? They're not going to go and check whether that's true or not. It's really up to you whether you want to be honest or not. That's your personality and your decision to make. But what they're looking for is these numbers and metrics and data, and you should be able to back it up, right? So that's what's really important, because they're going to drill down into everything that you say. Last thing before I forget is, in your writing assignment, no weasel words. So this is extremely important as well. They are not looking for long-winded responses. Use data points, use structure, be to the point. And when I say weasel words, I mean avoid words that says expert says, research says, probably, often, many, some, cutting edge technology, right? These are all weasel words. These are very vague. It does not articulate confidence. It does not articulate credibility. So anytime you want to say research says, instead of saying research says, cite your sources. According to this market research, based on this report that was published on so-and-so date, here's the data that I want to present, right? So try to use and cite sources. Be very confident. Must is a good word to use. We must do this. We believed, rather than saying probably we thought it was a good idea, because that demonstrates lack of confidence, and you lose credibility very quickly. So that's weasel words. There is actually a link in here in this presentation, which I will also share with you guys later. So let's get into leadership skills or leadership principles. So there are 14 of them. These are all published on their website. So do enough research on the website. That's extremely important as well. Customer obsession. This is the most important and critical leadership principle that you absolutely will be evaluated against, right? Amazon takes customers very seriously. They want to make sure that they can earn customers' trust. They pay a lot of attention to their delightness, and so they will simply obsess over their customers. So as you're thinking about stories and preparing, you really need to make sure that you are highlighting stories that demonstrate this leadership principle. So a probable question can be, tell me about a time when you had to deal with a difficult customer, or tell me about a time when you had to say no to a particular customer. You need to have a very strong story that highlights your customer obsession, right? One of the stories that I came up with was how I went against my leadership team to meet one of the most requested features from our customers, because the leadership team believed one way and the customers were asking something else. And so how I had to build a case around convincing my leadership team that we should go about and deliver that capability to meet our customers' requirements. So these are the kind of examples that you should think about. Ownership. This is extremely important as well. They take ownership very seriously. You need to demonstrate that you are an owner on anything and everything that you do. You have to see it end to end. You're not passing the buck on the other. As product managers, you have to be the owner. You are the CEO of your product. It's not a misnomer or a myth. It is true. It depends on how much and how hard you want to work towards owning that particular problem and that charter. So never say that's not my job. Never say, I let the marketing team drive it. It's okay for others to do the work, but you are accountable for it. So your response should be, it was marketing team's responsibility, but I was accountable for a particular project. So I had my oversight. I asked the marketing team to give me regular updates. And when I did not hear from them, I asked to do regular check-ins, right? So you need to demonstrate ownership. Invent and simplify. This is a bit challenging, especially for those who might not be in product management roles, but they are looking for innovation. They are looking how you come up with an idea and how you can take it to market. I emphasize, I would recommend you to emphasize on the MVP approach towards solving any problem, which speaks to the simplification part of this leadership principle. I really like to use the word crawl, walk, run. I used that during my interview as well, and it worked out really well. Crawl, walk, run basically means you start with something really basic. You are testing the waters. just enough functionality that gives just enough value to the customer. And then you work towards making it more and more sophisticated and adding more capabilities to it, which is the walk phase and then the run phase. So if you can highlight stories that demonstrate this, it'll be really helpful. The next leadership principle is about intuition and instincts. So the principle itself says leaders are right a lot. They have strong judgment. They seek diverse perspectives, but they also like to disconfirm their own beliefs. And this is where you can use stories where you use data to make a decision, because everyone has opinions and everyone has point of views. But when you have data, you can rely on the data and you can rely on that judgment rather than point of view that you may not be very confident on. So it's a hard one to really have a story around, but just think about times when you use judgment to make a decision. You were not confident about something, but you took a risk, right? And one of the stories can be you took a risk, but was that risk a calculated risk? Did you weigh in all the pros and cons on that risk? So that's the thing you should think about as you're thinking about responding to this question. The next one is bias for action. So this is where Amazon truly believes that the people they hire are very much focused on speed and agility, right? Many organizations face this challenge where they spend a lot of time trying to decide on something. And while it's good in a way because you want to make sure that you're going and making a decision with everything considered, it can just take a very long amount of time, right? And that differentiates a company like Amazon that's growing so fast versus those that are not. So they really value this leadership principle. You need to demonstrate here how you have taken decisions and actions very quickly. You've calculated the risk. You've done studies, but not extensive, and spent volumes of time towards it, right? This is where, again, the crawl, walk, run approach really helps, because you can always say that as a product manager or as an individual, I am looking to run with things in a crawl, walk, run manner. I'll start with something small. I'll look at the data. I'll look at how the market responds, and then I will build more capabilities and further scale the capability out, right? So that's something that they're looking for in the responses. Earning trust. This is extremely critical as well. They are looking for candidates who are credible, right? And I use this really, really wisely and I think that helped me. They asked me a specific question. Tell me about a time when you had a challenge and you probably thought a mistake was made. And I actually said, let me tell you about a time when I made a mistake. And this is something so critical because you just leveled up the amount of trust that the other person has in you because you admitted to a mistake, right? A lot of us are afraid of admitting mistakes in interviews. I think it's not a good practice. You should be very proud of mistakes that you've made because it's given you self-awareness. It's given you knowledge that you will not repeat the same mistake again, right? So it's okay to admit that you've made mistakes, and that will help establish your credibility. It will help establish that the team can believe in you. Because one of the things that they state in this principle is leaders do not believe their team's body odor smells of perfume. So it's really, really pointing to the fact that everyone makes mistakes and it's okay to admit mistakes. But what's more important is you highlight what did you learn out of that? What was your learning experience and what will you do to avoid that mistake in future? Next one is learn and be curious. So this is where you have to demonstrate your passion towards learning and up-leveling your skill set, improving your knowledge, because believe it or not, nobody is perfect and nobody is a genius, right? We're all learning continuously. It's a continuous process, and you need to demonstrate that through a story. My story on this was, I've taken up so many courses outside of my core product management. I've worked and shadowed product marketing. I worked and shadowed customer support. So I continue to expand my influence on functions across the organization. I continue to acquire knowledge outside of my domain. So I took a course on data science, so I highlighted that. I took a course on growth hacking, which was completely unrelated. It's a very marketing focused concept, but it just demonstrates your passion, your curiosity to learn. And that's what one of the things that they value a lot. Next one is have backbone, disagree, and commit. So this is where how you would run into disagreements with your colleagues, probably with your leaders, how you can respect each other, how you can quickly move towards making progress, even if you don't agree with each other. And this is, again, very difficult to come up with a story on. But think about a time when you had a conflict and how did you resolve that conflict. And in that, you can primarily articulate that you had a disagreement, but you both agreed that it's okay to disagree on this, but it's the right thing to do for the customer or right thing to do for the business. Here are some metrics that we will measure success. If we get to these, then we will continue to invest more. So let's agree to disagree, but let's move and march forward, right? And once we've made that decision, you have to be fully committed to performing, right? That is extremely important as well. Is once you've agreed on it that this decision is made, everyone is fully committed. You should not do anything half-heartedly from that point onwards. So that's what they're looking for in this leadership principle. Next one is delivering results. So this is your laser focus on business results is extremely important. How things that you've done let or move the needle for one of the important metrics in your organization, be it revenue, be it profit, be it number of customers, adoption, usage, customer satisfaction, right? All of these are different metrics that you can use. If you're in a technical background, you can use metrics like number of bugs that you closed, number of customer issues or cases that you helped deflect, the automation percentage that you helped fulfill. So these are all the different types of quantifiable results that you can highlight as part of your stories. Dive deep. This is extremely important as well. They are looking for your attention to details. They will be, so the way they would do this is when they ask you a behavioral question, you would respond back. You probably will respond back within 5 to 7 minutes. And then from then on, they will probe you on everything that you state. So you need to have a story, but you need to have a lot of data points within that story as well, right? And that's when they are looking at how deep can you go? How deep are you into looking at problems? And are you really paying attention to details or not, right? So one of the examples that I gave was we had a challenge around reporting, and some of the numbers did not make sense. So one of the easiest things I could have done was I could have asked my data engineer to redo the numbers and give me the results. But instead, I rolled up my sleeves and I started looking at the spreadsheet myself by asking all the right questions. And I looked into the data more and more and more. I spent probably 2 to 3 days to really get to the bottom of the issue. And that's the way I was able to uncover something, and I pointed that out to my data engineer, and he and I figured out that yes, indeed, some of the sources were incorrect. So as you can see, right, in this example, I demonstrated how I rolled up my sleeves and how I was not afraid of going into the details of a problem in order to do the right thing for the business. So that's what they're looking for. Insist on the highest standards. So again, you want to make sure that you're delivering quality over a very hasty, speedy job at something. So you want to make sure that everything that you do it with full passion, you do it with full quality. You're not compromising on the customer experience. You're not compromising on the business needs either, right? So you have to strike a fine balance. But ultimately, the point is that you need to insist on high standards, quality work, and it's really quality over speed, right? Frugality, I don't think they really asked me on this. It might be for people manager roles, but they're looking at how do we make sure that you can deliver with limited set of resources, right? One of the stories that I had prepared for this was how I worked on this particular project with limited set of engineers. And what did we do to go to get to market very quickly with a limited set of engineers. So think about stories where constraint is something that you can talk about, right? What constraints you had from a resource point of view, from a time point of view, and how you actually valued that constraint to get to the outcomes that you had in mind. Okay, two more to go. Think big. So this is where they're looking for some bold ideas or something that was out of the box that you thought of and you actually drove. They are going to ask you this in senior roles probably, because at senior roles, they do expect you to have the ability to innovate and to think out of the box. This was actually my first phone screen, was all about what are some of the innovative things I did, why I did, why I believed it was innovative. So there was a lot of competitor research that I did that I had to surface as part of the response to this. Hire and develop the best. This again would not be applicable, for many of us because it's more for people manager. But they're looking at how you would hire, what are your patterns around leadership, what kind of hiring principles you have, so on and so forth. So I want to be cognizant of time. I know we are at the schedule for 45 minutes, but I'm going to go a little bit over because there's so much content to cover. Okay, so let's talk about general guidance on how to respond to some of these questions. I think I've already highlighted some of this, but I'll go through this once more. Having 2 to 3 stories for each of the leadership principle is going to be very important. That's how I prepared for it. I had a visual storyboard. I used the tool Miro, very helpful. And I kind of outlined all the different stories against each of these leadership principles. I repurposed some of the stories to fit the leadership principles based on the question. So you might not need to have 14 times 2, 28 stories. You might have about 10 to 15 stories, but you can repurpose the same story against multiple leadership principles. In other words, the same story can talk about customer obsession, ownership, thinking big, simplifying, etc. Right? Do not recycle your stories as you go through these interviews, because these interviewers are all going to talk to each other and they're going to discuss the stories that you've shared. So don't use the same story with every interviewer. Come up with different stories. Provide strategic answers and responses, not tactical, right? Don't say something like, it took me 10 hours to build a PowerPoint, and so I did X, Y, and Z, right? It's not very strategic. So talk about a problem that's big, right? Don't go for something that's very tactical in nature. Be confident in your responses. They will ask you follow-up and probing questions, so be prepared for that. Use the STAR format, which we talked about earlier, and then don't shy away from using the word I versus we, right? You are selling yourself, so don't be humble, strike a balance, but try to earn their trust and don't be afraid of admitting mistakes. Okay, so these are some questions. I will send this out later to you guys. I'm not going to read through all of these, but these were some questions that were asked of me. Um, one interesting question was number 5, which is, tell me between your phone screen and now, right? So the time that I had in between was about a week. How did you prepare for today? So I was a little bit taken aback. And then I said, yeah, I went through a lot of AWS resources and I looked at competitors. And believe it or not, they asked me, did you play around with the AWS console? And I said, yes, because I did that as part of my VMware job. So these are the kind of things that they will ask you. So when you respond something, make sure you can back it up. So that's going to be important. And then, what are your hobbies? That was an interesting question. And then one tough question was number 12, where they challenged me on my decision on moving from a big company like Cisco to a small company like BlueJeans. And I actually disagreed with him. I said, I don't think, in a very polite way, I don't think it was like demoting myself. I think it was the most gratifying experience because I was able to work across functions and do so many things and roll up my sleeves and own the problem, run with it end to end. So I would like to kind of disagree with you. I don't think it was demoting myself, but I think it was the most gratifying experience that I had. So that's that was my experience. These are some of the resources that I went through to prepare along with the stories. So I try to learn as much as I could about the culture of Amazon, about the leaders, about the products, what analysts are saying, competitors, right? How this differentiates from Google Cloud and Microsoft Azure, how they are positioning it differently, what are some of their earnings number, right? So it was very important for me to do that because this was a very business focused role that I was interviewing for. And one of the tricks that I realized is don't let any of this work go to waste, right? And the way you do that is if they ask you a question, you can always say that, hey, I looked at the numbers and Amazon is amazing. So the question can be why you want to come and work for Amazon. And you can say, I mean, it's such an innovative, fast growing company. I can't believe in the last 4 years, the revenue has grown from 5 billion to 10 billion. So that growth is amazing. I've been looking at the shareholder letters that Jeff Bezos published um, to their employees and that they are public, and I'm super impressed by it. By the way, this statement on this date was very fascinating. So look what I just did. The question was why I want to join Amazon, but I just highlighted, everything that I learned about Amazon, the research that I did from all these different links to highlight how serious I am about this company and how passionate I am about it. Right? And this tip is actually useful for any other company you interview for. Learn about their vision, their values, their financial statements, right? If it's a public company, and boast it in one of the interviews because it's going to be extremely, extremely helpful to your advantage. Okay, wow, I did finish in time. So we have time for Q&A. We'll love to hear from all of you on what you guys thought of this. So there are a few questions. Yeah.
Ashmi, there are already around 9 questions. 8 of them are in Q&A and 1 of them is in chat.
Great. So let's go through them. First question is around customer experience by or exposure by Harsha. If someone has consulting experience with Accenture, which is a very heavy customer facing, that should help. Oh, absolutely. Any customer facing role is gonna make it super easy for you to transition into product management. My wife, I helped her transition into, her actual role was QA, but we positioned and rebranded her brand and her resume and LinkedIn to highlight a lot of the customer activities that she was already doing. So it's very much possible. In fact, you're very lucky to have that role. but it's definitely going to help to transition into product management. Did you change your CV for every company you applied for? Absolutely not. Look, guys, I don't think it's possible, reasonable. It's better if you do, if you have the time and if you're really passionate about that company. But in most cases, the same CV should highlight your brand the same way. Unless you are applying for different types of positions. So in one company, you're applying for program management, while in other company, you're applying for product management. So if that's the case, then yes, you probably should change your CV. But if it's the same title, then you don't need to change your CV. It's this, you are a brand, right? The brands never change. You are who you are. Your accomplishments are what they are. So don't change them. It's just waste of time. How or where will you share it? So I'm assuming you're talking about the recording. It will go out to you in your email. So I have the list of everyone who's registered for this webinar. I'll send this recording out. Is the writing assignment given on the day of the onsite? Yeah, that's a great question. No, it's not. You actually have time to prepare for it. They usually ask you to complete it 2 to 3 days before your onsite. So you will have your first phone screen where you will be grilled for an hour. And if you clear that, then you would be you would get on a call with a recruiter, and that's when they will give you your written assignment. And from there, you will have about a week to 10 days, so you can space that out. And then one very important thing I forgot to mention is leverage your recruiter. I think this is something we often forget. And that doesn't apply just for Amazon, it applies for any company you're interviewing with. Recruiters are your friends. People forget that. Why? Because you and them share the same motivation. They get compensated based on how quickly they can close candidates. So it is in their best interest to find the right candidate and to close the candidate. So they will work with you as you're going through the interviewing process. Some recruiters are very upfront, especially in the Bay Area. They will give you tips, but there are recruiters who may not be that seasoned and that savvy. So it's completely okay for you to ask them, can you give me some tips for this interview? Can you give me some insights into the personality of the hiring manager, personality of the interviewers, personality of the panelists? And I actually got to learn a lot about that. That actually was a very important thing for me because I got to know about their personalities, and it was right on target. One of the interesting personalities that I got interviewed with was he's not going to have any facial expressions. So be aware of that, because that is so critical. Sometimes I get thrown off when I don't get acknowledgement back, right? And then the other tip I got, which I used also, was ask the interviewer, have I answered your question? Take a pause, right? And let them tell you, no, I was looking for something more in detail. Or can you go a little bit more in detail on this or that, right? So by doing that, what you're just doing is you are giving an opportunity to the interviewer, right, to ask you more questions if they're not satisfied with it. Okay. The next question is, how can one enroll for a mentee-mentor program with you? Do you accept one? That's a great question. I am very much interested in doing that because of the amount of interest that I have received. So why don't you send me a note and I will work with you on making something work, because I definitely want to help people. And I think by doing so, I will, I will benefit the community. So please send me a note on that. How do you answer the question about competing priorities? Competing priorities is definitely a tough question to answer. You always have to keep in mind customer value and customer delight in mind. So the way I answered competing priorities and the stories that I had was, what's the right thing to do for the customer? What's the right thing to do for the business at that point in time? And if there's ever a choice and a competing priority between a customer request and a business priority, I would prioritize customer requests. It may not align to your business priorities, but at least for Amazon, they value customer priorities more than they do business priorities. What to do, some general must-learn resources common for all product management to begin with. It'll be great if you can share some. There is a ton of information online. In the Facebook community itself, there's a lot of information, free resources. There's a ton. My masterclass is focused to give guided coaching to students. So if you're interested, you can join that. I will, over the months and weeks, share curated resources to the audience who subscribed on my website and on the Facebook post. Over the next few weeks, I'm doing 2 recruiter sessions. I'm going to do some interviews with product management leaders to share their experiences. So just stay tuned and stay in touch with me. I will share more and more resources. What about technical questions? Were you asked any? They did not ask me a whole lot of technical questions. They knew my familiarity with cloud computing in general because of my VMware background. Be prepared though, at least play around with the product. AWS, log in, they have a free tier. There is a website called cloud.guru, which I subscribed to, which has a lot of Amazon training resources, AWS resources. So if you're really inclined towards Amazon, learn as much as you can on AWS, take a certification, the simple one, Cloud Practitioner one, that will boost your credibility. Do you have any tips on framing stories using the STAR method? Yeah, as I said, right, brainstorm, visually map it out. There is really no single way of doing it, but write it down. Like I used to write down all the stories as I was giving a narration. And once I wrote it down, it gave me clarity of thought, and I that kept rereading it. So I was able to better memorize it and remember my structure. How easy is it to get a role from business analyst? Very easy. Business analysts, they are customer facing, they have business acumen, they work on requirements. It's very easy. It's just about framing and branding yourself in a different way. Very much doable. How can I improve my PM chops if I'm doing more of an execution and single contributor role while the sole founder is doing the strategizing? You have to shadow, you have to steal, you have to force yourself into being part of those meetings. And ultimately, there will be a point where you can talk to a lot of things. You might not have done it. That's okay, right? For example, you may not have done a competitive analysis personally, right? At the job you're in. But do you know how to do competitive analysis? Absolutely, right? Do you know how to do SWOT analysis? Absolutely. So just highlight that in your resume. You've not done it because your boss never asked you to do. That's okay, but you know how to do it. So highlight that in your resume and as part of your interview. So if you can shadow as much as possible on the strategy front, you can understand how decisions are being made. It's totally okay for you to highlight that as part of your interviewing process. Could you give a brief overview of what the various rounds of interview typically focus on? So as I said, right, every round will be a different leadership principle assigned. So the interviewers will be assigned 2 leadership principles, and they will judge you and ask you stories on those 2 leadership principles. So that's the way these rounds are structured. When transitioning from QA to product management, how do you think you repurpose accomplishments, especially in a case interview setup? Again, it's very unique. You have to highlight your customer exposure skills, your opportunities to solve customer problems, documentation, test scripts, how you are making sure you are highlighting all the use cases, how you work with product management to give all the feedback on all the QA activities that you did. Um, for my wife, I helped her very much, where she actually came up with new ideas as she was doing QA. So can you highlight that you came up with 10 different ideas as part of your QA testing that you surfaced to the product management team, and out of that, two of those ideas were shortlisted by the product managers to make it part of the roadmap. Now, how awesome that is, right? You are already demonstrating your product management acumen by this story. Wouldn't have done customer research. Yeah, so I think you have to position JP your role, right? And come up with stories that can speak to some of this. So again, it's all about establishing your brand and confidently articulating stories. So as I said, you should just repurpose that. What if you have to build a product X from scratch? So Ashish, this is a completely different type of interview. I think I'm going to do another one on my Facebook experience. So stay tuned for that. But this question probably deserves a very detailed answer. But there is a structure to this, starting with the problem statement, starting with personas, prioritizing one of the problem statements, prioritizing one of the personas, why you prioritized it, brainstorming a bunch of solutions, looking at alternate solutions that are out there. Why is the one that you picked better or different than the others? What would the user experience look like? The mocks, metrics for success, all of that. So we'll probably do another session on Facebook at a later point. Would basic PM courses LinkedIn improve chances of getting selected? Absolutely, Abhinav. Look, I mean, all these classes are great. I'm not going to say that my class is completely revolutionary different than the other classes out there. LinkedIn courses are great as well, right? It's all about knowledge. It's all about what works for you. Some people prefer more hands-on approach. Some people want some projects that they have done on their portfolio that increases and showcases their brand. So it really depends. But if you are looking at, if I was a hiring manager and if I have two candidates, I have one candidate who has done 10 LinkedIn courses, and I have one candidate who'd actually built two projects and created two PowerPoint slides that goes through this product journey. Guess who I'm gonna pick? I'm gonna pick the one with the two presentations, because he's invested a lot of time versus going through a bunch of recordings on LinkedIn. So it's all about branding, Abhinav. Nitin, thank you for the appreciation. Any tips for sounding natural, good? This comes with practice. We are running out of time. I'm going to continue through, guys. So if people can stay on for a few more minutes, I will say, please fill out the survey. It will help me get better at this. If you can, I will send an email as well. But your feedback will be extremely important for me to get better at my delivery of content. For this question around sounding natural, you have to practice, 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 practice. Do many mock interviews. They are very helpful. Look at yourself in the mirror. Trust me, it works. Do a selfie recording. In my masterclass, I'm asking all my students to thanks, Abhinav. I think you are right. I should post the feedback, but I'm not going to disrupt my PowerPoint here. Actually, I might just do that while I speak. But speak in the mirror, look in the mirror, and practice. Do a self-recording and watch the recording. It might sound a bit weird and strange to do that, but it actually works. You will be able to understand where you are taking time. You will increase your self-awareness by doing that, right? Avoid using the words fillers, right? They are called as fillers. So avoid using them. Be very structured, be slow in your responses, right? Be patient, pause, take a moment to breathe, right? So these are all the general tips that I can give you towards interviewing. What type of questions did you ask the interviewers? Oh, that's actually something I did not highlight, Reshma. So thanks for pointing it out. The three questions that I prepared were, what does success look like in this role? Okay. That's a very important question because I need to know, for me to be successful, what I need to deliver on, right? And knowing that helps you understand and evaluate whether this role is a good fit for you or not. Okay. The second question I asked was around why did you choose Amazon? What got you excited to join the company? Tell me about your experience. And then the third question, if I recall correctly, was what were some of the challenges that you face as a business in growing and scaling, etc. So you can prepare yourself, but do prepare yourself because again, it gives and shows credibility. I applied to Amazon to take an online assessment test, which tests you under various behavioral situations. It seemed as though the questions can be interpreted in many ways. So I'm going to refrain from answering this question because I don't know the right answer to this. So send me an email. I'll be happy to do some research because it's a very interesting question. And I'm also happy to ask around probably once I start Amazon from some of the recruiters within Amazon if they can give me some insight. So I'll be happy to share this. But right now I'm not in a position to answer this. How can we send you a note on the mentee program? I'll send you, just go to my website, pmmasterclass.live and put in your name and email. I will reach out to you, Mustafa, once you subscribe to that. There was same question asked then, how can we follow you? Yep, so can just sign up on the website. You can follow me on LinkedIn. Do you work with business analysts? I don't actually, just because my company at VMware does not have any business analysts, CD. So hard to answer that right now. Any tips for someone interviewing on Facebook for a PM interview? So I will do another session for that. And did you get a chance to talk about this during the interview? Shanti, so I did not. I purposely refrained from highlighting this. And were there any technical questions? I already answered that. Okay. So I think we're on time here. Thank you everyone again for attending this. I really enjoyed this session. I hope I could have seen more of you on video. Maybe that's what we do next time. But I would look forward to keeping in touch with every one of you. And please fill out the survey so that I can get some feedback. And stay tuned for my next webinar. So thanks again, everyone. And have a wonderful rest of your day and evening. Take care.
Thank you, Pashmin.
Thanks, everyone.